podcast called Jellison Podcast.
First ever type 1 diabetic in UFC history.
Doing fine. Nice to be with you.
Get out! He's like, yeah.
My tunnel vision and my periphery, I'm like all field.
Hey, you know how it is, though. Hey, when your team.
I don't remember that. That's crazy.
What's up, everyone? We're back with another episode of the Jellison Podcast. Today I have a very special guest, Ryne Smith. Ryne, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. Appreciate you having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to do this. How's the offseason been going for you guys? I know you guys just kind of sent home your players for the rest of the month, but
yeah, it's been good, man. It was very fast, and a lot of things going on right after the season had ended with recruiting and things like that, trying to figure out how to sign guys without being able to see them in person or have them on campus. But it was good. Things happened very fast for us, and we got our class for next year locked in. So it's kind of slow right now, just because our guys, like you said, finished up finals and headed home for the month of May. But we're in the works of planning our June and July out with recruiting opening back up.
Mm-hmm. And you kind of talked about the recruiting aspect. Do you guys have like sort of pause, I guess, in terms of recruiting, just knowing that you can't see the guys, you're meeting with them on Zoom and things of that nature?
It's not really. I don't think there's a pause to it. I think the recruiting never stops. As much film and as much highlights and as much game footage as you can watch put you in a better position. I think that really does. And then the Zooms are important. The Zooms are important, I think, to get somewhat of a face-to-face contact and learn a little bit about the recruit, and have them learn about us too as well, is to give them a face with the phone call. So no, it's never really a pause to it. It's recruiting is always an ongoing thing.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned the June and July schedules. How do you guys set up those off-season workouts? Like, how do you guys approach the off-season?
It really is. It depends on who you're bringing in, and how you think you finished up. So last year, I felt like we did a poor job of defending in space one-on-one. So that's going to be a huge emphasis for us going into these off-season workouts is doing that, because no matter what you scheme or what you game plan or no matter what your ball screen coverage is, no matter what, at the end of those shot clocks, you're definitely going to have a one-on-one guard your yard situation. So if you can do that in space and you can close out properly and keep guys in front, and keep guys, in front of you without it getting into rotations, you're going to be really tough to deal with defensively. So I think that's a huge part, of what we want to do going into this off season. And then obviously skill work. Summer is a great time to get better as an individual player within your team. So those two things going into the June and July are super important for us.
Mm-hmm. And looking back on last season, aside from the things that you mentioned, what types of things do you think that you guys need to work on going into next season?
Yeah, number one for us is going to be the weight room. I think that's huge. I think we had a huge hire last October with our strength and conditioning coach. He's going to be amazing for our guys, and then just getting that individual attention with him each and every day is going to be massive for us, because we had a lot of young players, and we were going up against a lot of grown men that were upperclassmen last year. And especially with this transfer portal, other teams in our conference that are going to be bringing in transfers that are older dudes. It's huge. It's huge getting that body right and making sure you don't get bumped off your spot on offense or defense. So that's going to be big. It's going to be real big.
Mm-hmm. And I know for like high major programs like Purdue, I know fans kind of want them to get every guy that enters the transfer portal. For a mid-major school like yourself, what is that process of looking into the transfer portal and seeing what would be the right fit?
Well, the transfer portal is going to change the complexity of college basketball, I think, for a really long time. I think with that one-year transfer rule going in, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Not all transfers that go in are bad guys, or they're not leaving a bad program. Maybe it just wasn't the right fit. But for us, it's finding the right guy. It may not be the best guy at all times, but the right fit for our position and for our program. We have a specific set of principles that we abide by in our program, and if those guys are really on board with that from the jump, then we know that they might be the right fit. So yeah, especially at our level, it may not be a guy transferring from a Power 5. It may not be a guy transferring even from a mid-major. Maybe a great Division II player and there's great basketball from NAIA, Division II, Division II. No matter what, you're going to find great players everywhere. So, like I said, just that right fit is incredibly important for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, even with Purdue, I see that Paint brings in guys that aren't necessarily the most highly recruited. I mean, you look at guys like Sasha Stevanovic or PJ Thompson, who kind of fit in that mold that we've seen over the past, 15 years since he's been here,
Right.
something crazy like that. So do you guys kind of plug and play? If you kind of understand what I'm saying, I don't know what the word for it would be, but do you guys find those specific roles and just find people to fit those specific roles?
Yeah. Obviously it depends on who leaves. If you had a couple guys transferred out, maybe that guy that was there on your current roster that transferred out maybe necessarily wasn't the right fit for that role that you need to fill. So I guess to answer your question, you got, like I said, you got to do the best job you can of finding someone who's going to be a star in their role. And I think going back to Paint, like you said, Paint, no matter what, he recruits off the tops, even seniors in high school, juniors in high school. He finds those guys that are going to thrive in that role and be a star in that role. So that's huge in recruiting. If you can do that, you're going to have some success.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, just kind of looking at a broader picture of your time at Incarnate Word, how do you feel like the program has progressed since you've gotten there? I know you guys have had some struggles, but you guys are trending in the right direction.
Yeah, it's super difficult. People don't give enough credit to guys who build programs from the ground up. Like this was literally a ground buildup for Carson Cunningham, my boss. And the first year when I wasn't here, they took lumps. It was, as he likes to put it, was very bloody. And then my first year here, his second year, we made some strides. Won some games here and there. Had a huge win at home against Sam Houston State, which was the top of the conference. Beat McNeese at home, and then this past year, you go on the road off tops to Northwestern State, who was like the 4th seed in the conference tournament, beat them right off tops in the conference opener on the road, and then you get to be the 7th seed in the conference tournament. So it's a gradual build, and it doesn't happen overnight, and sometimes it's hard, and sometimes you got to really stick with it. But like I said, I don't think the general population who are basketball fans really understand how hard it is. And then when you're in it and you're really grinding it out each day, when you finally have that success, it makes it worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. And when a team does struggle, is it hard to get them to focus on the process as opposed to just the result?
A little bit. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it's especially for 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, it's difficult to get them to enjoy winning each day. If you go in and you have a great practice, but then you'll get beat in a bye game, it's tough maybe to keep their heads on straight. But we did get better in that process. In that week, we had some successful days. So sometimes it is, but like I said, when you get down to it and you get to those conference wins or you win on the road, that's what makes it worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. And kind of going to your path as a coach, at what point did you realize that you wanted to get into the coaching role when your playing days were over?
I think it was early on in my career at Purdue. I think it was very clear to me that I was done playing. I don't think I would have been done with basketball. I don't think I could have just cold turkeyed it. You know what I mean? My dad's been a coach for forever. So, he's probably going on almost 40 years of coaching. His dad was a coach. So I think just that competitiveness and staying around that was really important to me.
Mm-hmm. And how did you make that decision to go into the coaching role? I know you were a grad assistant at Purdue right after you graduated. So what was that process like of staying with the program there? So,
when I was finishing up after my senior year playing, I was kind of deciding, I knew I had another year actually to finish my undergrad because I was an education major and I couldn't student teach when I was playing still. So I still had to finish that up. And it was actually easy. I just went into Paint and said, hey, I want to hang out. I want to learn as much as I can on the other side of it. And he was like, let's do it. So it was super easy. Paint's the best. Like every job I've ever gotten is because of Paint. So, hung around there, learned a ton from that staff. That staff was incredible. It was Shrewsbury, Greg Gary, Jack Owens, and Coach Painter. All those dudes are head coaches now. So learning from them was really important for my growth. And then And then after that, went into high school coaching. I was a head high school varsity coach right out of graduation. That was an incredible learning experience. So it's been a cool little journey. And then obviously the operations job at Miami of Ohio under Jack Owens, he got me into the business. Would be, eternally grateful to him to get me into it. And then obviously this great opportunity down in San Antonio here with Coach Cunningham it's been a fun ride.
Mm-hmm. And what was that year as a kind of a grad assistant, student assistant type role with Paint and them? What was that like?
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun seeing the other side of it. You really, it's so much different, and you learn so much on the other side of it when you're like in the locker room as a player. You don't get the ins and outs of everything. Like there's so much that goes into game planning that as a player you don't really realize, right? So like all that stuff that they put on the scouting report is really detailed, and it's incredibly important to know the ins and outs of all of the things they put on that paper. But that's just the surface, right? So they go in and they're watching all this stuff and hours and hours and hours of film just for a game that's going to last an hour and a half. You know what I mean? It's so important to be that prepared and at that level. And that was huge. That was huge for me to kind of figure that out and understand that that's how much and that's what it takes to win.
Do you feel like you kind of took that part for granted, like just the amount of time that coaches put in, or players now might take that for granted just because they don't realize it, not because they're like being disrespectful?
Oh, there's no question. Like you said, it's not a disrespect thing. It's just like, I think one of the most important person in that Purdue's program is Nick Taruso, the head video coordinator. Like he is a straight up, like for lack of better terms, grinder. Like he is in there grinding. Like he is on it. He knows everything. He's tech savvy. He's incredibly intelligent. So he's probably the backbone of what they do game planning wise in terms of film and all that stuff. And I think that little stuff, and even the managers who help, and the graduate assistants who are there, all that time that's put in, you definitely take it for granted as a player. And looking back on it, like now that I'm on the other side of it, it's not something you really pay attention to when you're a coach, but it's certainly there. It's like, hey man, I just put 10 hours into the scouting report. Come on, man. Like, can you jump to the ball one time and help us out? Like it's a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. How much you like actually learned from the previous coaches and like Paint and Coach Gary, Coach Owens, and how much of that do you take with you and implement that into your own coaching style?
A ton. I remember I was actually interviewing for a college coaching job right out of college after that student assistant year I had, and like Coach Shrewsbury just sat me down and just like literally walked me through how to put together a scouting report. And I'll never forget that. Like, I remember drawing up plays like of the opposing team that I was scouting for this interview. And he was like, dude, you got to like break up the courts a little bit so you don't have 1,000 lines on this court so they can see what's going on. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But like little stuff like that, I think the detailed piece was huge with me at Miami of Ohio, with Coach Owens, figuring out like how much film you have to watch. You have to watch every game. I mean, you have to watch the opponents every game before you're going into. You may not have that much time, so sleeps, isn't really at a premium when you're going into those competitions. So, just any little nuance or detail you can get to give you an advantage is worth it. Like if you have to watch, an hour extra film to get one little piece of what the opponent's doing, it sure as heck is worth it.
Mm-hmm. And kind of going forward further, I should say. That job that you mentioned was Clinton Prairie. So how did that come to be? And what made you want to make the jump to the high school level? Yeah, so it was actually kind of lucky. When I was in the student teaching program, finishing out at Purdue, one of my classmates was student teaching at that high school and was like, hey, I know that the social studies job and the head basketball coach job is open up. Why don't you apply? Oh, that's perfect. It's right down the road. Like it's perfect. So I applied, got an interview, was fortunate enough. And then Eric Ork and Brent Miller down there were great to me and hired me. So that was a really, really good experience. And then not only that, like I knew I wanted to eventually get coaching, but I thought it was really important for me to experience small town high school basketball. And that was a thrill, man. It was great. We had that thing packed out and people going nuts. And
you know, it wasn't a huge gym, but we had just a ton of fun with it. And those guys that I coached and back in 2013, 14, 15, whatever it was, we still tight. We're still close today. So amazing experience.
And you kind of bounce around a little bit at the high school level over the course of those few years. So talk about that process and what those experiences were like.
Yeah. So looking back on it, obviously you can, you know, hindsight's 2020, but at the time, my second year at Clinton Prairie, we had won 15 games. We had everybody coming back, and if I had to do it over again, I would have stayed. Like I certainly would have stayed. I just felt like it was a 1A school at the time, and I just was like hungry for a bigger school for some reason, which was the incorrect attitude to have. But I wanted to get to a bigger school, so I went to Anderson. Didn't really work out, and then came back to Benton Central, and that was a great experience too. I would have stayed there as well, but then Coach Owens came through and offered me the job to get into college coaching, and that was too hard to pass up. So it was just a couple things here and there that made me move around. My wife wasn't too happy about it, but we made it through. She didn't leave me, so we're still strong in San Antonio. But you know, again, those experiences wouldn't trade them for anything, and the relationships that I found in each spot were important as well.
And I want to talk about that move to Miami, but when you're at that year, you're at Anderson. My cousin played. I believe he was a sophomore, as like my freshman or sophomore year, and we went there because we have a bunch of family in Anderson. So like we were like rolling like 25 deep. So we go to the game, and I look down and I'm like, is that Ryne Smith? I was so confused, and I was like I like had this whole plan about how I was gonna like try to meet you after the game and all this. I don't know. I was like fangirling, I guess. And it was like the first quarter, and things weren't, I don't know like what exactly was happening in the game, but things weren't going your guys' way. And you rip off your sport coat and you chuck it to the bench, and you might have got teed up. I don't remember, but I don't know. I just thought I thought that was a funny story.
None of the above would have surprised me. I'm sure it all happened. There's no doubt. I'm sure it all happened. If you were to tell me which game it would, I'd probably be able to tell you which play and what happened. But no, that's zero surprise, and would have surprised my wife even less. So there's no question it probably happened.
Yeah, my cousin played for Noblesville. I should say.
Gotcha. Yeah, they sat in the 2-3 zone. We did have a nice dunk that game off of an after timeout set. But yeah, that was a good one. I remember they had a really good player. I can't remember his name. He was like a swing 4-man. Don't know where he ended up, but he was really good. He killed us down the stretch. I have to think about what his name is, but anyway.
Might have been Nolan Ginther.
That sounds right. Yeah, the good players. They had a bunch of really, really solid players. So I remember that game for sure. It was at Anderson. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, he plays at DePaul now. He actually just finished up his senior year. But so kind of going back to that move to Miami, what was that process like, and how much did you learn in those years?
It was great. You know, Coach Owens gave me the opportunity to be the director of ops, and in that role, at that time they've since changed the rule, but at that time you couldn't be on the court, and you couldn't even rebound, you couldn't even be around basketballs with the team. So it was strictly operation stuff for me. Now I would help out here and there, putting together like shooting workouts or whatever, and which was good. But the most important part for me was learning the ins and outs of a Division I program at a detailed level. Budget, travel. One thing that I took for granted at the time was really understanding that the way you put together a road trip is so huge for your success when the game starts. Like you can't just wing a road trip and say, hey, we're gonna go here. We're gonna no, it's got to be detailed and planned. So those guys are well rested, well fed, and your travel plan is correct. So when the game starts, they're ready to go. That's one thing that I think I took for granted in that role at the time. But it's so important. Like it's so important how you travel. Winning on the road is hard enough as it is. So everything's got to be tight when you do those things. But I learned so much. I thought I knew a lot about college basketball going into that position, and Coach Owens and the rest of that staff had forgotten as much as I knew about college basketball. So it was huge. It was huge for my growth, and I can't thank them enough for that opportunity. I can't thank him enough for helping me get this job currently, because he knew I wanted to be in coaching as well. So it was big. It's a experience that I wouldn't trade for anything.
Mm-hmm. And then how did you what was the process like of you transitioning to now being an assistant coach at Incarnate?
So it was insane. So I actually had I think Coach Cunningham called me expressing interest in hiring me like late June of 2019, and my second daughter was born on June 26th. So I go, hey man, I'm super interested in the job. Really want to talk more with you about it. But if I go like 0 dark 30 on you for a couple of days, like it's okay. I'm in the Westchester hospital. I'm gonna get back to you here in the next couple of days. And he was fine with it. So then it started July happened, and more phone calls, more interviews had happened, and he hired me, which was great. But then I moved down here for like 10 days, and I lived in the dorm for like 10 days, which was an awesome experience. Like I was a bachelor again. It was insane. But the hardest part is flying back, and I had to recruit at the University of Illinois NCAA Academy for like 5 days. It was like Wednesday to Sunday or whatever it was, and then drive back to Oxford in a rental car, pack up my house, and then move down to San Antonio with a 18-month-old and a 1-month-old baby and my wife. So it was like the craziest summer. And like we get down here, and we like has like a 24-hour truck ride with towing my car behind it. And my wife's in our car driving the 2 babies down here, like the 24 hours that it takes to get down here. But we just finally got to our house, and we settled in. We looked at each other like, man, that was insane. But we're in Texas now, and I think we're where we need to be.
Yeah, I mean that is first of all, that is absolutely insane. That I couldn't imagine doing that.
Yeah, like it was. I think we moved on like a Monday in the first week of August, and I think Friday and Saturday we had a wedding in Cincinnati, and then actually Dakota Mathias and Gabby Mathias' wedding was on that Saturday, so we drove back to Oxford on that Sunday, packed up the house, and then headed to Texas on Monday. So it was crazy, but certainly worth it. And my wife said she'll do it once, and then we can't do that again. So, but it was worth it. We were incredibly thankful to be down here, and we love San Antonio. San Antonio is a great town, so it was worth it.
Mm-hmm. And when I was talking to DJ Bird, and he was saying about just like the Purdue family and how you guys all help each other. He actually mentioned your name. So what is it like being a part of that family, and especially on the coaching side with all the great coaches that have come through Purdue and are getting their starts now?
Yeah, it's important. It's like I told you earlier, like every job I've ever gotten is because of Coach Painter. Like I remember I was actually interviewing for the job at Anderson, and the day Caleb Swanigan committed to Purdue, that afternoon, Paint was on the phone for me, helping me try to get a job. So it was like, dude, you just got the biggest recruit probably almost ever, the #1 recruit in the country, pretty much, that just committed to your school. You should be, cracking open Miller Lights. You should be doing that, but you're on the phone for me. Like that's just the type of guy he is, though. Like he's always willing to help. That's important. And then obviously, the connection with Coach Owens and then hiring me, that got me into this business. And then honestly, Carson Cunningham, Purdue guy, hiring me here. So it's incredibly important. That family is super tight knit. Like even, every now and then we'll call, we'll get on the phone with each other and pick each other's brains. And, I more so reach out to those guys who are head coaches now just to get advice on certain things. Like what was their advice on the transfer portal? Where do they think it was headed? What would they do if they were in my shoes? All that stuff. To take that advice from guys who have been uber successful. So, it's something that you always lean on.
Mm-hmm. And going back to your playing career now, what was the process like of narrowing down the schools and choosing Purdue?
So I don't know. I think my recruiting process was different than most. Like I finished my junior year of high school with like 0 offers, not even a letter that I've had from anybody. So, I kind of, I put my mind to getting in the gym and making sure, you work on and getting better, work on your game. And I think from like May of 2007, after my junior year, to like the July period, I was in the gym religiously. Like I wanted to get better, wanted to do this. So then we went to the It Takes 5 tournament in Cincinnati, and I had a couple good games there. And then we went to another AAU tournament there. And then after I got back from Louisville, we had like 3 or 4 days before we went to Vegas. But after I got home from Louisville, there was like a stack of mail like waiting for me from my mom, like this big on our kitchen table. And at that time, it was all like handwritten letters. Like, I mean, I'm not that old, but like 2007, it's all handwritten letters. Like Tubby Smith, Mike Bray, like all those dudes are handwriting letters to send you. And I would forget. Again, I didn't have any letters before that, so like all of a sudden, like all this stuff showing up, and I was in between going from Louisville to Vegas, and I was like taking my high school girlfriend like on our first date to like Red Robin or something. I'm like, we're pulling up to Red Robin. I'm like, hang on, like someone's calling me. I got to answer this. I answer. He's like, hey, this is Mike Bray from Notre Dame. And I was like, it's who? Like, you got to be kidding me. So it blew up pretty quick, which is a really fun experience. But I think what was cool about it that got me to Purdue was in Louisville, it was the first time Coach Lusk, who was there the first time, saw me. We went 0-4, like we were terrible. Like we were coming off the It Takes 5 tournament. We were all tired. We didn't play well, but I was, moving without the ball, and like we were running the motion offense and stuff. And I was shocked because then they showed interest. Coach Lusk is calling me, Coach Payne's calling me. And then I get to Vegas, had a couple good games. And then they wanted to see me one more time. So I actually hopped on Indiana Elite's team. Now, Indiana Elite's team was like insane. Like it was like I was so far at the end of the bench, I was like a dot on this team. Like it was Lewis Jackson at the point guard. I think Zach Novak, who was at Michigan, Walter Offit, who was at Ohio State, then ended up at Ohio, and then like Cody Zeller. We're all on this team. Like it was an insane team. So like hop into this tournament and, just played my role, just did everything, didn't go wild, hit the open guy, took an open shot. And I think the crazy part of this, it's actually a lesson for all recruits out there. Like I didn't go out of my role in that tournament. And that's what solidified them wanting me to offer a scholarship, because they knew I was going to come fit right in. Think about who I was coming in with, like to Purdue, like all those dudes, the Baby Boilers, whatever, Keaton Grant, Chris Kramer, all those guys. So I think it was like the first weekend in August, I took an unofficial to Purdue, played 3-on-3 with some of their guys. Came up to the office, Payne offered me a scholarship, and I was on I-25 on the way home back to Toledo. I called him. I was like, hey, I'm coming. Like, let's just do this. I don't even need to wait anymore. But it was a very, very fast process. That summer it was a blur, but it was a lot of fun for a little bit. But I don't think our mail lady appreciated, a stack of mail that much that each day. But super grateful and happy, and couldn't have made a better decision to choose Purdue.
Was Lou Jack committed at the time that you guys played together in that tournament?
I want to say I believe he was, because this was super late. This was like the last weekend in July going into our senior year. So he had to have been. Yeah.
Fair enough. I know a lot of guys talk about like their first few practices and kind of the moment of realization. It's like, oh crap, like this is the real deal. So what were those first few practices for you like?
Oh, tough, man. You got to think I was 155 pounds soaking wet at 6'3" coming into that environment. And, I think my first individual workout was like a small group of like, it was me, Lewis, and Chris Kramer. And like we would like run all over the place, and we were doing like shooting drills, and we were just, they were dogging us. And the last drill was like 1-on-1 from the top of the key, and it was like a 3 dribble limit. And I'll never forget, like I got the opportunity to play offense like twice, because you had to get a stop to get on offense. So like, I remember handing Lewis the ball, and like before it like left my hand, he was like around me dunking it. So then, like the next time I was like, okay, let me figure this out. So then Kramer's up. So like I'm flipping him the ball, like locking in. I'm like, okay, I got this. Hand him the ball, like woof, right around me. Like he's literally hanging on the rim before I can even move my feet. And then like I get the ball for some reason. Somehow I got to stop, and they handed me the ball, and I like pivot, and like all of a sudden it's just taken away from me before I could even dribble. So it was like if it would have been on film, I'm glad it wasn't. So thank God Nick didn't do his job. Nick True, so didn't do his job that day. So thankfully for that. But like if it would have been on film, it would have been something to post now. Like it would have been embarrassing. But I think you realize at that point, you're like, this isn't Whitmer High School anymore. We're not going to play, Evergreen High School in Northwest Ohio. This is the real deal. There are some straight up ballers here. So I think I went in after that workout and just laid on the floor in the locker room and just laid there for like an hour, just contemplating life. Like it took me a while to adjust.
Mm-hmm. And coming into a team, like you mentioned with Etwan, Jawan, Robbie, Keaton, Chris Kramer, did that make things easier or harder for you?
Harder at first. harder at first. I know for sure, like my entire freshman year, like I didn't redshirt, but I think I played sparingly here and there in the preseason, and then not at all again once Big Ten started, and rightfully so, because there was, all Americans in front of me. But I think the most important thing for me was like getting my butt kicked every day. I think that was so big for me to kind of realize that, it's not going to come easy. And if you work for it, it's going to be all the sweeter when you finally get playing time. So like my junior and senior year going into those games, like it was like, okay, I'm not going to screw this up because I took my beatings for this. Like, I'm going to play, 30 minutes against Michigan State. Like I earned this. I earned getting whooped by Etuan every single day. Chris Kramer beating me up every day. Keaton Grant beating me up every day. I think that was huge for me. And that's something that like, I think young guys going into college now can learn from too. It's not always going to be your best day. But if you can fight through that, you can take those hits, you can take those beatings and still keep coming back and practicing hard every day and treating each practice like it's your game day, you're going to have success in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Was there anyone that you kind of leaned on to show you the ropes or be kind of like a mentor to you when you were a freshman or even a sophomore?
Yeah, I think my roommate was Kramer my sophomore year, so he was huge. He was huge going through it because he had been through all the wars by that time. He was a senior. He played major minutes since a freshman, so he was big. I think one of my best friends, the best man in my wedding, Mark Wilford, was huge. He was a walk-on that kind of understood where I was at coming in and not getting any playing time at all, but still having to practice hard every day. That was a good role model for me. And then just kind of the guys, like my best friends now, like DJ and Drew Anthrop, like those guys were really just kind of a comedic relief after practice. Just like, hey man, dude, did you see what happened to you today? Like, you know what I mean? Like, did you see what each one did to you today or whatever? Like, it was finally like, it's really not life or death when that happens to you at practice, as long as you come back the next day and work hard. But I think all those guys and really everybody, it was such a family type atmosphere that it really kept you grounded and really kept you level headed to really understand the bigger picture was making sure Purdue was winning games.
I mean, I can only imagine trying to go up against Etuan Moore in practice every day. I mean, did he just sauce everybody in practice?
Yeah, he and Juwan and then Rob obviously were normally would take turns being the best player in practice. But I just took it as a challenge. I wasn't going to win very many times, but I knew if I could get the small wins here and there trying to guard Etuan, I'd be all right. But yeah, I think the most fun we had was when my freshman year when we were just a scout team. Like I'll never forget Bobby Riddell when we were going into the Davidson game, and Bobby Riddell was playing the role of Steph Curry, and I was like one of the dudes who was just in the corner just waiting as Steph Curry was just like cooking these, and Bob took it as like a challenge, like okay, I got the green light no matter what here. And he was absolutely murdering dudes. And it was like the funniest thing to watch because here's like little Bobby Buckets, this little dude who's like going, crossover, hezzy, and then like dotting people's eyes from like deep. And these were like all Big Ten players that he was killing. But that's the biggest thing that stands out in my mind when it comes to like people cooking people, because Etuan was just consistent. Like, but when that stuff would happen and like guys like Bob Riddell would get off on those guys who were like all Big Ten, all defensive players. That was like the most fun to watch because like, those guys were looking at like paint, like, hey, and he's like, yeah, that's how it's gonna be. Like, what do you expect? Like, this is Bob Riddell, this isn't Steph Curry. But no, like we had some really good times back in those practices for sure.
Oh, that's funny. Is there? I mean, for players coming into their freshman year at any school, what advice would you give them that either someone told you or you wish you had known?
Honestly, with this day and age, with the portal, when the one-time transfer rule, it's a little difficult. I think just sticking with it, like I mentioned, you're as a true freshman in Division I college basketball, like you got to be incredibly special to make major minutes or get major time on good teams. Like you just have to. Like either if you're a true freshman, you're getting major minutes. Either you're really really special and you're winning games, or your team's really bad. Mm-hmm. Like that's just the way it is. So with those freshmen coming in, like it's okay to take your lumps. Like it's okay to get beat in practice as long as you keep working at it. I think that's important for all young kids. It's like if you come in and you're just given everything, then when you have everything, it's not going to mean as much. When you're playing 25 minutes, 30 minutes, I played basically 2.5 years of college basketball, and the other year and a half I sat on the bench, and I think that was the best thing for me. I think late in my senior year, Lewis and I got benched. I think it was at Ohio State. We weren't playing well. We got beat by Penn State at Penn State, which was unheard of at the time. So Paint sat us, and then I think we ran off a bunch of games in a row and beat Michigan at Michigan, and that was that. And then we got to the tournament, and it was great. So I think the bench is going to be okay in the short run. I think you don't be satisfied with it, but understand that there's probably a reason for it at the time. And as long as you keep working and battling people each day in practice and treating every practice like it's game day, you're going to be all right.
And as your career progressed, how did you assume the role of becoming a leader on the team, especially after Etwan and Jawan and Chris and Keaton left?
I think it went from being just kind of a leader by example for the early parts of that, just doing everything right, making sure you're on time for everything, making every sprint. But then as time went on, later in my junior, earlier into my senior year, it was kind of being an extension of the coaching staff. Like if there's a dead ball in a game, make sure you're huddling guys up, in practice before a drill would start, make sure your team's huddled up, make sure they're, locked in for what the goal is for the drill at the time. And then really using your voice, because by the time you're a senior, if you can't speak to what needs to be done and what's going on and be an extension of the coaching staff, then you haven't been listening. So, I think that was important. And I think like as time went on my senior year, the more and more, I think more and more vocal, but it was easy because you had Lewis, who was an incredible leader. And then obviously Rob was a great leader as well. So it was very easy for me to fall in line with those two guys.
Mm-hmm. And what were those years like with all the massive success that you guys had? Like, are there any moments or games that stick out as most memorable to you?
Yeah, the obviously anything in the NCAA tournament sticks out. I mean, those games are special. The atmospheres are special. But I really think ones that stand out in my mind are obviously West Virginia at home. I think my sophomore year was maddening. I think by maddening I mean the level of noise was insane. I think the Ohio State game my junior year when Etwan went off will always stick out. It was like get Etwan the ball and get the hell out of the way. Like so that was special to be around as well. And then just my senior year without those guys, I think the win at Michigan late in February was huge. They were like Trey Burke, Tim Hardaway Jr., Zach Novak, Stu Douglas, all those guys. And I think that win that really solidified our chances of getting into the tournament was big. And it really stands out because it was like my neck of the woods too. It was like, 35 minutes north of where I grew up. So all my people were there. And that really stands out to me as well. Just from, I guess, not a selfish standpoint, but just one that really wasn't at home, that wasn't like those other two. But there were so many. I mean, there were so many special moments with that group. And, a lot of that has to do with, the baby boilers who grew up and kind of ran the Big Ten there for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So you mentioned obviously the noise in Mackey. We know Mackey's the best environment in college basketball. But actually, Demetric Trice, who played at Wisconsin, just graduated this year, put them as number one for the toughest places to play that he's ever played in. But are there any other Big Ten arenas that were tough for you guys or you personally?
Yeah. And we never played well. I felt like at Northwestern, and not it was always really loud there, and they had a good environment. So I don't think we ever really played well there. But obviously the other ones that are super loud are the Breslin Center. That's a really tough one. But anytime you go down to Mackey South and Bloomington, that's a tough place to play. And it gets incredibly loud there, and the fans are passionate. I remember we pulled up to Bloomington in the Purdue bus one night, and we were like unloading our stuff to get into the hotel the night before we played at their place. And there's this guy like just peeing on the bus. He was just peeing on the bus for no reason. So a lot of stuff like that would happen down there. But I think those two road games, Michigan State and Bloomington, are incredibly tough because they get really loud. But just like from memories, I think another one to add to that. We never played well at Northwestern. I just always felt like that. Whether we won or not, I just felt like we never played well there for some reason. I don't know why, but I think those three really stand out in my brain. But especially the Breslin and down in Bloomington.
What did Paint say when that dude was peeing on the bus?
I can't even remember. I don't even know. I don't even remember what happened. We were all just getting off. And we were just like, hey man, just do whatever you need to do, man. It's it's one of those things. It's just, you laugh at it. He's just having a fun time. Whatever. Not that big a deal. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect that to happen though. When you
yeah, you would. Come on, you know those people.
Purdue fans wouldn't though.
I hear you.
I don't think
They want to. You want to.
want to, but So last thing I wanted to ask you. I mean, we know that you had an absolute clip at Purdue, but aside from yourself, who do you think's the best shooter in the Painter era?
Ooh, in the Painter era. It's very, very difficult for me to go against Carson Edwards and Ryne Klein. It'd be very difficult for me to not put them 1 and 1A just because of their performance. Carson's probably got to be 1. I think the performance Klein had against Tennessee in the tournament's got to be up there. So probably those two guys. I'm gonna get a text message. I'm gonna get a call if I don't mention Dakota Mathias after he listens to this. So I'm gonna have to put him up there. He's definitely behind me, but he's in that mix. I'm trying to think. I think just those top two guys. Like Carson's probably 1. Klein's probably right up there under that. Just I was actually at the game in Louisville when he went off against Tennessee. I about fell off the third level balcony just when he made the shot to tie it at 80. But I think those 3 guys are up there with, and I think that's probably a big reason why they had a bunch of success in their years as well.
Yeah, 100%. I have to agree. But I'm gonna have to wrap this thing up. Thank you so much for coming on, taking the time to do this. It was awesome.
All right, no problem, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yes, sir. Hey, good luck going into next year, and stay safe down there in San Antonio.
Appreciate you, man.